And now we're going to move on to the Washington Commanders. And Josh, it was a bit of a rough season last year for the Commanders as well. For a while, it looked like Sam Howell might be the truth, but then it very clearly looked like he wasn't the truth. And then they traded him away to upgrade at quarterback in the draft. Last year, they go 4-13, which led to a new head coach. Dan Quinn comes over from the rival Dallas Cowboys. He's been running that defense over there. He will now run the Washington Commanders. And he brings in Cliff Kingsbury out of Thailand or wherever the hell he was staying after he left the Arizona Cardinals. He was their head coach from 19 to 22. He is now going to run the offense in Washington. And it's a new look offense at most positions. Jaden Daniels, the rookie out of LSU, is going to be the starting quarterback. It's probably a 1A, 1B situation at running back with Brian Robinson returning, but Austin Ekeler, who was a commodity 2 years ago, and now he's kind of limping in with the Washington Commanders. Terry McLaurin is still there. He's still the wide receiver one, though. Jahan Dotson, a couple of guys on Twitter called us out today for calling McLaurin the wide receiver one. They think Jahan Dotson has that role. Luke McCaffrey, Christian's brother, went a little bit higher in the draft than at least I expected. Finds himself in a nice spot where he could be the wide receiver 3, De'Ami Brown at wide receiver 4. Zach Ertz comes out of retirement, plays like 4 games in Detroit, and now he's the starting tight end in Washington. And they also spent a pick on a rookie tight end, Ben Sanat. So Josh, when we look at these players, I'm actually going to have you get started on Austin Ekeler, because I feel like Eckler's a guy who's been very polarizing in the fantasy community this season. We don't know exactly what we're going to get after what turned out to be a rough 2023, not just for Ekeler, but for the entire Cardinals team, or Chargers team, rather.
Yeah, I think Ekeler definitely got the short end of the stick with a lot of the offensive line issues that they suffered. But it was also a very different offense, right? Like Joe Lombardi, coming in those 2 years in 2021 and 2022, Austin Ekeler scored just between those 2 years, scored 30 red zone touchdowns on the ground. Like stupid numbers. Last year he scored 5. So and again, that coincides with a scheme change. So maybe, sure, Austin Ekeler a year older. All right, fine, whatever. Body not built for the heavy wear and tear red zone work. Sure, whatever. I'm going to say that maybe the scheme is the fault here, because it worked pretty well in New Orleans when Lombardi was there with Sean Payton and Alvin Kamara. Comes over, does pretty well with Austin Ekeler in Los Angeles. Homeboy leaves, and now they can't score touchdowns in the red zone. So, you can take it for what you will. But to me, there's no defined wide receiver 3 on this team. There's no third target, right? The Cliff Kingsbury system has always spread the football around really well. Yep. I'll get to some of these points a little bit later with Terry McLaurin, but only once has a pass catcher on a Cliff Kingsbury offense, which again really is only 4 years in the NFL, 2019 to 2022. Only once has they ever topped a 20% target share. And that was the first year of DeAndre Hopkins, right? So say what you want about Terry McLaurin. I think he's a defined wide receiver 1. But that leaves so many other targets for guys like Jahan Dotson, the ghost of Zach Ertz. Maybe Ben Sanat comes out and starts to do things. Maybe Luke McCaffrey is a huge surprise. Why wouldn't they go to Austin Ekeler, right? Like, that just makes too much sense for Austin Ekeler to come in and have a 14% target share in this offense. The biggest cause for pause for me, and I want to bring up Mike's comment here from South Harmon, where he's like, Jaden Daniels to the moon. I'm not opposed to this at all, because Jaden Daniels has the moon in front of him because of his legs and what he can do, not only as a runner, but he did pretty well as a passer last year en route to a Heisman Trophy. Mobile quarterbacks don't tend to target running backs very often. That would be my only worry here with Austin Ekeler. But the thought that there's no third target, no defined third target, the red zone work is completely up for grabs, because when we start talking about Brian Robinson, you'll see why that makes all the sense in the world for Austin Ekeler. There's RB2 upside here with Austin Ekeler in this offense.
Yeah, I also want to throw South Harmon up on the screen for $20. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. But Josh, one thing you brought up was, mobile quarterbacks don't tend to throw to the running back. When I do our projection sheets, I go look at the offensive coordinators' last 2 years of running their offense. And the thing that struck me is the Kingsbury offense did go over 100 targets to each of the running backs, but never went over 17.5% to the running back. So I don't know if they're going to throw as much with Jaden Daniels as they did with Kyler Murray. So there are 100 targets probably up for grabs, and there's no denying Brian Robinson showed out as a receiver last year. He really did. But Austin Ekeler is a better receiver. So you have to.
And that's my thing with Brian Robinson. Like, I like Brian Robinson. I think he's good at a lot of things, but very much like Damian Harris, he's not great at any one thing.
Yep.
Like, he's good. He's serviceable, but that's it. And so, like, to kind of see where his ADP is right now, he's going RB33, I believe, on Underdog, where Ekeler is about RB31. That makes all the sense in the world to me. Is Brian Robinson going to outperform that? 100%. 100%. Yeah. But I don't think that he has near the upside that Austin Ekeler has because of the tools that Austin Ekeler possesses.
I'm just going to have you keep talking about Robinson. He was the next guy anyway, so we kind of already got started here. So let's just keep going in because I know you had some points you wanted to make about him. Last year, I kind of brought up, you expected to see more out of Antonio Gibson in the passing game, but Robinson had 4 receiving touchdowns. I watched most of those because I live off of Red Zone. 2 of them were like very fluky, like you can't expect a repeat, but still that's 2 more touchdowns than you would have expected him to have with Antonio Gibson. Now you have Austin Ekeler, who's just a better Antonio Gibson, though older.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this mostly just from a rushing perspective, right? So over those 4 years when Kingsbury was in Arizona, they combined for 18 touchdowns in 2019, which was tied for 7th in the NFL. 22 rushing touchdowns in 2020, 4th in the NFL. 23 rushing touchdowns in 2021, tied for 3rd. And then, of course, the big step back in 2022, they were tied for 15th with 15 touchdowns. Probably what led to Cliff Kingsbury getting fired.
And Washington,
if there's one thing,
Washington only had 14 last year. So
okay, so that tells me, why did they bring in Austin Ekeler? Because he scored 30 rushing touchdowns in the red zone over 2021 and 2022. Brian Robinson, in his 2 seasons with the Commanders in 2022, he had only 23 attempts inside the 20, which was 2 fewer than Antonio Gibson. He scored all of 2 touchdowns. Both of them were inside the 5. Last year, he had 26 rush attempts inside the red zone. Gibson only had 8. Those 26 led to only 5 touchdowns, 2 of them inside the 5. Okay. So if you're telling me that an offensive coordinator that loves to call running plays right up the gut inside the 5-yard line is going to give the football to somebody who doesn't have a great success rate in the red zone versus one that does, which way are you leaning?
Well, especially
Ekeler.
Well, you also factor in Jaden Daniels, who is going to be a weapon in the red zone. You're going to see an offense where they're going to bootleg Jaden Daniels and run Austin Ekeler right around the goal line on a flat route. And Daniels is either going to tuck and run inside if the corner commits to the outside on Ekeler or the linebacker, or Daniels is going to take it to the sideline, or Eckler's just going to burn the guy to the side and he's going to dump it in there. No, Mike, not Chris Rodriguez to the moon. No. Let's stick with Jaden Daniels. I think he is the benefactor in this situation. But yeah, Josh, the poor red zone showing could be interesting. And then also interesting, every year it's a debate. Is this the year that Terry McLaurin is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football? I joked a few years ago, he is a perpetual wide receiver 20 candidate. That is who he is as a person. Our Renee just dropped an article on him today. She has very high hopes, and it's all about the improvement at quarterback. Josh, how do you feel? And again, we had someone immediately call us out on Twitter and say Jahan Dotson's the wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at his target shares over the last 4 years, 22.3% in 2020, 23.64% in 2021.
This is down. Terry McLaurin, right?
Yeah, it's gone down every year since then. 21.7 in 2022 and then 20.75 in 2023. Now, obviously last year they utilized all 3 of their guys, McLaurin, Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, all of them right across the board did very well, but no one of them really shined out and said, hey, that's my guy. Now, again, you come in, you look at it this year, Curtis Samuel's gone. You're replacing him with essentially a project at wide receiver 3 and Luke McCaffrey. You bring in someone like an Austin Ekeler, brand new quarterback. Is he going to hyper target a wide receiver 1 just out of comfortability and familiarity? Is this kind of like shades of, oh my God, Cliff Kingsbury, I finally got a wide receiver 1 again. 28% target share. Let's go. Like, is that going to be the situation? I don't know. Is Jahan Dotson even for real? Like, he started to pop a little his rookie year. Took a huge step back last year, in my opinion. Like, is the third year breakout a real thing for him? Like, there are so many unknowns when it comes to this passing attack for Washington that I almost like when I did my projections, I leaned into the familiarity. And for me, that was Terry McLaurin. I didn't go as high as 28%, but I did about 26%. That still got him to 140 targets, but he's never been a huge touchdown earner, right?
Yeah.
And most rookie quarterbacks, when they come in, they're not slinging 30 touchdowns.
So that's what I was going to say.
They're a lot closer to 20 than they are 30.
Mike brings up they had Sam Howell throwing the football all over the field, and Terry McLaurin couldn't make the dream come true.
Exactly. So it makes me nervous just from that standpoint. But as I mentioned, he's only like in a Cliff Kingsbury system, only one wide receiver has ever topped 20% target share. That being said, there have been 4 different instances where a wide receiver has topped over 8 targets per game.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do think that Terry McLaurin is in line for more than 8 targets in a game, especially when you look at what's behind him. So I think that there at least lies the potential for that type of, all right, maybe he can at least finish as wide receiver 15. I don't know that the ceiling is going to be there for like a top 10 finish, but I think that largely falls on how many touchdowns do we realistically expect Terry McLaurin to receive. I only have him at 5.
So
I'm curious what you have with that, Ryan.
I have him at 6 touchdowns. However, let's start with something people need to be aware of. I overproject, and it takes me a long time to get people back down to normal. Wide receiver is the hardest, Josh. Everybody's fucking good at wide receiver. You know I bitch about this every year. So I'm going to tell you his stat line before I tell you what that ranks for me. Because
see, what I try to look at, I look at where do you have him at fantasy points, total fantasy points? Where would that have ranked last year? Because again, when you're doing projections, you're thinking that everybody's healthy.
Yeah. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. So looking at McLaurin, I have him about what he did last year. 79 catches, 1,004 touchdowns is what he had last year. I have him at 78, 1,006 touchdowns. So I legit in PPR have him at 12 more points than what he had last year. However, last year that was good for. Where's Terry McLaurin? Always in the 20s. Oh, did he not even make the 20s last year?
28.
Wide receiver 28. It falls to 35 for me right now. Now, obviously, with receivers, I don't project injuries. The only thing I'm projecting with wide receivers is I bumped Rashee Rice down because that man is missing multiple games, plain and simple. So I bumped him down in targets compared to where he should be, which could put him ahead of McLaurin. So I have him in the 30s right now. I'm not a big believer. I'm kind of with Mike on this. I think the dream might be over. I will say your stats about the 20% target share. I only have him at 23% targets right now.
Okay.
But again, I have their passing way down just because it's a rushing quarterback, and I think they're going to lean on that.
What do you have for total pass attempts for Washington?
That would be 575.
So I have him even less than that. I have him at 539.
So how many total targets? Because you said you had his percentage up.
Yeah, I have his percentage at 25.97, and I have him at 140 targets.
Okay, I have him at 133. So we're about the same.
Yeah, something that I've kind of been doing with my projections, because so few quarterbacks are actually playing all 17 games.
Yep.
I only project the quarterbacks at 16 games.
I do with most, unless I know they're a guy who plays week 17.
Yeah, so I have Jaden Daniels at about 507 pass attempts total, which, considering what he was able to do in college, like, yes, we know he will run the football and what he can do.
I promise you, Josh, that's exactly what he's at in my projections, 507. So this is getting weird.
Hilarious. That's funny. But yeah, I mean, I only have him at 8, or I only have the team at 19 total passing touchdowns. Because again, like I don't really, rookie quarterbacks, they're a lot closer to 20 than they are 30 for me.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's fair. And then when we get into the rookie quarterbacks, it actually plays perfectly into our favorite bets when it comes to this team. And again, the bets are limited, and thankfully we do like rookie quarterbacks because the bets for this team specifically, Jaden Daniels is one of the biggest ones. So Robbie took him as higher than 19.5 passing touchdowns on Underdog. I feel like I need to throw out there that Robbie is a Commanders fan. I actually had Robbie on a show a few weeks ago, and he literally thinks the Commanders could make the playoffs. He is all in on Jaden Daniels. I don't know that I agree with the higher. When I look at my projections, Josh, I have him at 19 exactly. I wouldn't touch that bet if my life depended on it. However, Jaden Daniels at 500.5 rushing yards. I have this man over 700, Josh. Where do you have him?
Yeah, I have him at, I believe, 638 rushing on 116 attempts, which honestly, I think 116 attempts might be low. So
I have him at 133. So you're basically where I am. It's just you don't have the attempts in that I have. So yeah, smash that higher. And then Josh, you made me laugh, especially for a bet that we're going to talk about in the next one. But I'll let you talk a little bit about your favorite bet that you found on the Washington Commanders.
Plus 750 to win the division. So look, and you see, I'm an Eagles fan, right? But I'm a pretty realistic Eagles fan here. Kellen Moore going to Los Angeles with the Chargers. We all got pretty hyped. We got excited. Great quarterback, great situation. He's going to come in, light up the world. They obviously fell flat on their face. Justin Herbert only played 12 games. All bets are off in Philly, right? Sky's the limit. Bring in Saquon Barkley. Offense is a juggernaut. Everything's going their way. How many times have we seen the wheels fall off?
Enough.
Everybody's doubting Dallas right now, right?
Yeah, I think back to the
wheels could very easily fall off on Dallas. The Giants, they need about 18 Hail Marys to go, and it still ain't going to work for them. They're a really sneaky bet for me to win the division. You got a new head coach. Obviously, the new ownership group is excited. If Jaden Daniels comes in and plays really freaking well,
yeah,
the defensive-minded head coach, he brought in a lot of good pieces. They had a lot of high draft picks. If they hit on a lot of these early draft picks, like this feels like a very winnable bet, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I hate saying it because I'm not a Commanders fan, but this feels like a winning bet here because there's very rarely a repeat winner of the division in the NFC East. So I think right there you can rule out Dallas. Philly becomes the most logical point here.
Yeah.
But even last year, like going in, a lot of people were saying, look, Washington has a shot here. If Sam Howell can actually play well, they could be in a position to win some football games. Obviously, he didn't play well, so there went that idea. But this is a different team. It's a different scheme, different offense, different defense, different coaching staff, ownership, all these things. They cleaned the slate. They brought in a lot of really good pieces, and they still have some existing really good pieces. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I certainly don't want it to happen, but I don't think it's a bad bet.
For me, I would need to see another 0 at the end of that before I'm betting on Washington to win the division.